Welcome to this episode of the show. I am your host, Simon Mitchell, online body transformation coach and founder of I Am Paradise Fitness. In today's episode of the show, we're talking all about weight loss. Specifically, what are the character traits, the behaviors, and the habits of someone who is able to lose weight, but also maintain those results for the long term? i.e., what are the habits of a successful dieter? But before we get into that, if you are watching this on YouTube, do a guy a solid, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the reach of the show. And if you are listening to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you give it a rating, a review, if you can, on the platform that you are using. Again, you would be an awesome human being for doing those sorts of things. And if you hang around to the end of this particular episode, I'll talk to you about some free downloads that you can get if you look at the links in the show notes below. But let us get straight into this episode of the show. Now, for this particular podcast, we are actually looking at some research, and I'm going to put that research up on the screen for those that are watching on YouTube so you can kind of see what the study is, and you can also, if you want to geek out and get into the detail, you can go and check it out for yourself. Now, you might need to go past the PubMed abstract if you want to get into the detail, but I will leave that to your detective skills and your ability to do that on your own. But what does this actual study say? What did they look at and what did they actually find when they studied the habits, the behaviors, the character traits of people who are successful at dieting? Now, the first thing that they noticed is a difference between exercise, the amount that people exercise when they were able to lose and sustain weight loss versus when they lost it and they kind of piled the weight back on. There was a difference in the amount of exercise they did. So 90% of the people who were able to sustain their weight loss exercised 3 or more times per week. That is one of the character traits that we saw and one of the behavior patterns that were seen. Now compare that to only 36% of people who failed to maintain their weight loss actually worked out 3 or more times per week. So you can kind of see there is, again, a correlation. No one's necessarily drawing direct causation from this. It's just a correlation. It's just an idea. It's a kind of thing to start to piece together a puzzle, if you will. It's not a definitive this caused that. It's about pulling together information and kind of trying to make sense of it, really, to give you the best possible direction and course of action. So someone who is able to lose weight and sustain it typically is working out 3 or more times per week, and they're doing that consistently. So maybe ask yourself, what does your current exercise program look like? Could you increase the amount that you train? Will that help you to sustain that moving forward? Now, some people could quite easily work out less than 3 times a week and still maintain weight. Perfectly possible. It's not all about how much exercise you do. Obviously, nutrition is a huge part to play in that. But having more active behaviors, a more active lifestyle, making that change within your life is going to have a real impact further down the line. So if you can work out 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, depending on how experienced you are, that is really going to pay off dividends in the future from a health perspective, also from maintaining a slightly leaner level of body fat, if that's your goal, and if that's what you need to do, then that thing is only going to help. So maybe again, think about how much time can you commit to exercising? Would 3 times a week or more be possible for you? It's again one of those character traits that we saw within this particular study. The next one looked at the amount people were snacking. Now, snacking, again, sometimes it has its advantages, sometimes it has its disadvantages. That depends on the person. So, for example, you get people who, what we would call maybe grazers, who have little and often throughout the day, and that really works for them. They don't necessarily like big meals. They don't have to have big meals in order to feel full. They like kind of little and often throughout the day. That doesn't mean to say they're going to lose weight or be able to sustain weight any more than someone who doesn't follow that approach. But what did they see in this particular study? What are the general correlations that might give an indication as to how you might want to think about setting up how you adopt your nutrition? Now, they found that the trait that the successful dieters had was they on average snacked 1.5 times per day. Now, again, not necessarily that could be, and when we're talking about snacking, or what do you define as a snack and things like that, we won't get into the detail of that, but let's just broadly speaking say 1.5 snacks per day. Whereas someone who wasn't able to sustain their weight loss for the long term was at 4.6 snacks per day. So they were maybe a type of person who was still eating regular meals, but they were snacking frequently. Maybe it was to do, again, this is just me hypothesizing, not necessarily got all of the answers, it's me making hypothesizing and from all of this information. But maybe the food choices that they made throughout the day weren't filling. Maybe they opt for slightly more processed food, refined sugars, maybe even some alcohol thrown in there. And therefore, that meant that they were hungry during the day, so they opted for snacks. That meant that they weren't able to control calories, and therefore things snowballed from there. Again, that's just me just throwing out an idea. It's not necessarily fact. Again, you can still obviously maintain weight having multiple snacks per day. You've got to maybe think about what's easier for you to maintain. Now, I would suggest in a situation where you're maybe trying to transition, let's say you're trying to transition from calorie tracking to not calorie tracking, having maybe more filling meals during the day and less snacks would be quite a simple way for you to not necessarily overeat and go over your calorie targets, but you also probably wouldn't have to track as long as you managed what you were eating on a more kind of, not necessarily to the nth degree like you would in a tracking situation, but you're kind of making conscious decisions about more whole foods, more nutrient dense foods, more lower calorie options throughout the day. That's going to help you stay within a calorie range without having to think about it that much or even at all. But again, character trait, less snacking was associated with sustained weight loss. The third one was being conscious of behaviors when it comes to eating. So 90% of those people who were successful were really conscious of the behaviors they had around eating. And that was to do with being mindful, like what are you eating, feelings of fullness, all that sort of stuff. Whereas 70% of those who are in that sort of, I'd hate to call it the failure category, but maybe like yo-yo dieting, then 70% of those people ate without any real kind of thought process and in response to lots of different emotions. So emotionally eating, reacting to various different situations and feelings and resorting to food. They weren't necessarily mindfully thinking about the conscious decisions they can make around food and how that influences whether they do or do not successfully maintain the weight loss that they've achieved so far. So again, think about that. Are you mindfully thinking about what you're eating? Are you mindful about your eating behaviors? And have you got your kind of lifestyle set up and your habits and your behaviors set up to help you achieve that? Or is it something that you need to look at? Fourthly on the list was the use of social support. Now, this study was done back in 1990, so Facebook wasn't even a thing back then. I know because I was around in 1990. So social media wasn't a thing back then. So again, you've got to put into the context, what did they mean by social support? But fast forward now into the modern day, social support is around you everywhere you look. So you'll have Facebook groups, you'll maybe have WhatsApp groups, you'll have your friends, your family, work colleagues, maybe even a coach like me is your support network. So within my coaching program, my clients have access to me 24/7. They also have a closed Facebook group, which is a small community of people in the same boat. So they feel very kind of comfortable sharing information and kind of sharing their issues, their challenges, and looking for support. So 70% of those people who are successful use all of these tools that are around them, this support network, to help them on their journey, to help them through those difficult times, which undoubtedly will come along. Whereas the people that were in that yo-yo dieting kind of, let's call it again, failure category, 38% of those use those social support networks. So the vast majority just ignored them completely. Again, that kind of gives you an insight into, okay, what habits do I need to adopt if I want to be successful? Again, these aren't hard and fast rules, but they are things to maybe start thinking about. Have you got access to social support networks? Have you got access to people that are in a similar position to you? Do you have people that can guide you, support you, answer questions, pick you up when you're down, all those sorts of things? If not, seek them out in some way, shape or form. Maybe there is a Facebook group you can join for free. Maybe there is a group of your family or your friends that want to actually do a similar process to you, and you can all do it together. Or maybe you want to reach out and talk to me about online coaching, which you can happily do if you click the link in the show notes. Small plug, I know. Anyway, it is my show. And then lastly, 90 odd percent, I think it's 95% of people confronted problems head on. They were the people that were successful versus 10% of people confronted problems head on. So when you are faced with various different scenarios and situations, it's very easy to bury your head in the sand. It's very easy to not talk to people about these different sorts of things, which links back to the last point. But it is also very easy for you to just kind of try and kind of bury your head and kind of hope that shit blows over and kind of things will sort themselves out. But really the only way for you to sort problems out is to address them head on, because that's the way that you figure out a solution. You're forced into finding a method, a way around that particular scenario you're in, dealing with that problem, dealing with that challenge, whether that might be figuring out how you can deal with a particular business meeting, or where it's got food everywhere, everyone's socializing, maybe you're going out for drinks, maybe you've got date night, you don't want to disappoint your partner, but you're kind of worried about how many calories. These might be challenges that you face on a daily and weekly basis, that if you're not confronting those problems, you're actually not really developing the skills to deal with those problems. And at some point, it's going to become a little bit of an issue for you, because as we all know, life comes along at some point to really fuck us over at some point. Not that going out on date night is fucking you over. Well, maybe it is fucking you over. It depends how good date night goes, doesn't it? Anyway, hopefully that gives you a kind of an insight into the habits, the character traits, the behaviors that you may or may not need to adopt if you want to successfully maintain weight loss in the future. So think about the amount of times you exercise. Think about your snacking habits. Think about your conscious and mindful behaviors around food. Think about the social support networks that you have available and using them. And think about confronting problems head on. They are the 5 things that from this particular study came out as correlating to successful weight loss. Now, if you are someone who is looking to lose weight, lose body fat, then you might want to figure out how many calories you need to be eating in order to achieve those goals. And if that is you, then I've got something for you. Click the link in the show notes. You can get access to my free online calorie and macro calculator. That, along with my free calorie and macro guide. So if calories and macro is a bit of a mind fuck for you, you kind of can't get your head around what calories are, protein, carbs, fat, where does that all sit in the equation? Get hold of the ebook, and that will give you all the information that you need. On top of that, if you maybe want to look at your training, there's a free 4-week training program you can download as well. That would be pretty awesome for you, I should imagine. And of course, if you want to fast track and skip that whole process, you want me to take control of your training and nutrition, help you lose body fat, help you build muscle, help you build sustainable habits, help you transition from a tracking phase into a non-tracking phase, and help you build a sustainable way of living your life so that you can live a leaner, healthier life for good, then feel free, come and talk to me about online coaching. I will put a link in the show notes below. You can find out all the information you need, and you can also schedule a free consultation call where we can have a chat about you, your goals, where it is you're trying to get to, and maybe how coaching can help you do that in the shortest possible time frame. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for watching on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast wherever you are listening. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.